Now, the recent news that you hear about domestic abuse within the NFL might lead the average viewer to think that there's a correlation between domestic assault and football. Now, an HBO investigation has revealed a shocking link not between football, but between MMA fighting and domestic abuse. Now, these figures reported by Real Sports show that the rate of domestic abuse arrests among MMA fighters is more than triple that of professional football players. Now, the Bureau of Justice Statistics states that for every 100,000 American men aged 18 to 39, 360 are arrested for domestic violence. Now, that number drops to 210 for the NFL, and the adjusted rate among top-ranked MMA fighters skyrockets to 750. That is twice the general population. Now, I want to make a point about some of these numbers. As jarring as they are, these are just arrests.
Yeah.
These aren't incidents. So my guess is the incident number is a lot higher, especially when it comes to professional athletes and maybe women or men in some cases who are afraid to come forward about these high-profile people.
Yeah. We can try to take something from the numbers about how many people are actually getting caught or actually facing charges for it. But we have to assume that these organizations are generally, we know from their history, they're going to do as much as they can to protect their athletes, either so they can continue their careers or so that it doesn't make the sport itself look bad.
Exactly. And even though the sport is plagued by some of this domestic violence, there's really no recognition by the governing board and really no consequences for these athletes. In fact, in a recent interview, UFC President Dana White was quoted saying, "You don't bounce back from putting your hands on a woman," yet fighters with convictions return to the ring all the time, most notably and most recently Mayweather. So there's been a lot of different cases, but I think it talks about a broader issue with athletes and domestic violence. I think there's a correlation, and I want to point out that it's not just men. I mean, Hope Solo had an arrest with a domestic violence abuse, and so I think those are cases in which you are playing a sport where you are supposed to be aggressive and you are taught to be aggressive, and of course some of those attributes are going to come home with you.
Yeah, I think Ariane Celeste, who was one of the ring girls, I believe, for UFC, I think it was, she was arrested for beating the shit out of her boyfriend. And she continues her career. Very lovely lady. So look, I don't know if there's necessarily anything about the person before they go into the sport that makes them more likely to do this. We can sort of speculate, but that's the most that we can do in regards to that. But we know from the NFL and from other full contact sports like MMA that takes a toll on you and it changes who you are as a person. It can lead to like a lowering of IQ. It can lead to depression. It can lead to suicide. And maybe in some cases it can lead to aggression as well. Aggression that wouldn't have been there absent the sport.
I'm shocked by this.
Yeah.
MMA fighters are violent. Did you know another study came out, mafia kingpins indifferent to the rules?
What? Holy shit.
These guys, I mean, it's unbelievable. I can't believe.
But you always hear about like martial artists generally, like they train and that's discipline. They learn that they are then more capable than other people, so they shouldn't use it as a weapon. Of course, they're not then competing necessarily with it. But yeah, I think the combination of being hit in the head multiple times, the combination of that with possibly steroids and other drugs that can affect your mood as well, like that's a dangerous cocktail for someone, especially someone as physically capable as an MMA fighter.
But I also think that when you're talking about some of these sports and playing team sports, and I guess the notions that they mention when in the locker room and things like that, I think those people take home. I think those aren't concepts that are totally isolated and stay on the field. I mean, they did a 3-year study showing that while male student athletes make up 3% of the population on college campuses, they make up 19% of sexual assaults and 35% of domestic assaults on college campuses. Those are astounding numbers when you think about it.
Well,
I did not know that number before.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but the numbers show that NFL football players have a lower incidence of domestic violence than the general population, right?
Yeah, and that was my point before, is I don't know if necessarily those are numbers that, I mean, they could be totally that though they have a lower rate of that, but I also think that women or men who are in a domestic abuse situation may be more nervous about coming out when they're dealing with a high-profile athlete, especially when they know that not only is the league, but also the law is going to ignore them.
Yeah.
And this is coming on the heels of that Florida State quarterback, that young kid who got caught. There was a video of him punching that girl right in the face
Right.
in that nightclub. And, I'll probably take heat for this, but just judging by that video, I think he could go pro.
You think so?
God.
You would think that, and I sort of made a prediction like this in the first hour too, that these people would feel the greater scrutiny that they would be under. Both the professional football players, but especially the student athletes, like they do get checked in on more than other students. Their behavior, both in class and outside of class, is watched more closely. You would expect that they would perhaps be more careful, but they're also treated like royalty.
Right.
They have an endless supply of women throwing themselves at them. And they know that to some extent they will be protected by the heads of both academics and the athletics. And so,
right. And the general population has a conviction rate of 80%, whereas student athletes only 38%.
yeah.
I mean, that's
Really?
ridiculous when you're thinking about the kind of, like what you said, the scrutiny that they're under, but also the privilege that they're going to get just because they're bringing in money either to a professional sports league or even to, I guess, a
what's
school
the-
sports league.
You know what? Our current answer to domestic violence has been stiffer punishment. Does that really work? I mean, maybe we should be
I think it needs to be upbringing. I think we need to
so we need
bring
to
people
socialize.
up with more love and respect for the people around them. And, maybe I understand aggression on the field is important, but I think there needs to be a line in a different way that we talk about that so that it isn't carried on into the home and outside into society.
Why aren't there, we teach people life skills in school and stuff like that. We used to have, shop classes. They're getting rid of them anyway.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to prepare you for life. Well, one of the big things in life is how to conflict resolve inside of relationships.
Yeah.
Why isn't there a course on? I mean, that's important. So why don't we try to teach young men at a young age how to resolve conflicts, especially inside of relationships where there's a power difference dynamic happening? I mean, they don't teach them. They don't teach them in college. They don't teach. There's not.
That would have benefits outside of even just the domestic abuse. I mean, I think men and women should learn conflict resolution. I mean,
Right.
there's 100 things that we could add to school that Republicans are going to be against, and God knows we got to teach to the test
Right.
and everything. We don't really prepare people for when
life.
they go off into their actual life.
Conflict resolution, empathy, those are all things that need to
Yeah.
be taught in schools
So
to
the
avoid some of these situations.
And I think one thing that, I agree. I think that we should be teaching people that this is, of course, not acceptable. But one thing that's going to undercut that is it seems like the sort of people who are learning in their homes that this is the way you should treat people. The reason they're doing that is because the parents are either they're doing it themselves or they're not paying attention to the kids. They're exactly the sorts of parents who are not going to listen to anyone telling them, maybe it would be good if you taught your kids not to beat the shit out of people.
No, it's definitely
they were
cyclical.
raised to beat the shit out of people.
No, it's a
Yeah.
cyclical problem. I agree with you, but I think kids spend most of their time in school anyway. So maybe if that becomes something that's mandatory within schools to teach, that could be a beneficial program to avoid these situations or to at least improve them.